Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, who's an author, investor, and the CEO of Netcom Learning and AI Certs. I'm excited to welcome Matt Dixon, author of The Activator Advantage. In this book, Matt explores how adopting an activator mindset can drive personal and professional success. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be with you. Thanks, Michelle.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I am a researcher by trade. I happened upon this space of studying, sales effectiveness, if you will, quite accidentally. I went to get my PhD in political economy after college because I wanted to be a university professor, but then I decided I didn't want to be a university professor. I finished my degree anyway. And when looking for places to apply my research skills in the business world, most of my research and a lot of my interests in graduate school started revolving around businesses and why they make the decisions they make and how to drive greater effectiveness in their organizations. So I ended up at a company called Corporate Executive Board, which was then acquired in 2017 by Gartner Group. And I spent almost 20 years at CEB and ran a variety of research teams there. CEB was an organization that sold subscription-based research to corporate executives. For most of my time there, I ran the global sales and customer experience research practice. So we did basically, I would say, proprietary research, which we then sold into chief sales officers, chief revenue officers, heads of client experience, et cetera. Out of that experience, we ended up writing 3 books and publishing a whole raft of articles in Harvard Business Review. And since then, that was in 2017 that I left CEB. Since then, I've done a couple of things. I worked in management consulting. I worked at a tech startup, and then started my own business, DCM Insights, in 2022 with a number of former colleagues. And there we focus on teaching partners and associates in professional law and professional services firms how to be better salespeople effectively.
Mm-hmm. And how's that going?
Great. No, it's a fascinating space. It's one where I think it's a good fit from a business standpoint and for me personally, because it's not actually an area where there's been very much research. I think there's been a lot of kind of conventional wisdom and passed down anecdotal guidance around what should partners do to be more effective rainmakers in their firms and in the market. How do they win and retain and grow client relationships? And there hasn't been a lot of research done on this question. And so that's where I come in. And then I think from a business standpoint, it's a huge sector of the global economy, professional services, but it's one that's actually extremely underserved by traditional sales training companies. So there are a lot of big sales training companies. I know them very well, and none of them actually sell to law firms or consulting firms or accounting firms. Where these are not salespeople, they're doer sellers, they're professionals where they sell and they deliver. And so this segment has been very underserved for a very long time, both by research and by organizations that can come in and help their partners be better salespeople.
Yeah, so that's great. Looks like you filled a needed gap out there. Yeah. So part of the reason we're here to talk to you is about your book, The Activator Advantage. Start us by first telling us what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, so I had been, as I mentioned before, I'd been a part of a number of other books. We've done now, The Activator Advantage is our 5th book. I've been a part of 4 other books, most of them about B2B sales. So think about people who sell products like technology, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, things like that. And I had an experience back in 2012 after one of our better known books, The Challenger Sale, came out. And I was invited to present to the partners of a big global consulting firm. And they had their partner retreat. There were about 400 partners in the room. And I had been invited to present our research from The Challenger Sale, this book that had just come out about a year before. And I showed up and I started in on my presentation, and I was getting a lot of blank stares from the audience, as if I was speaking a different language. And about 45 minutes in, the managing partner of the firm stood up and starts waving his arms and says, "Can you please stop talking?" Which is a very unnerving experience. It's never happened to me before. It's never happened to me since. And he gestures for a hand mic to be brought over to him. Meanwhile, all 400 partners in the ballroom are looking at this guy and wondering what he's going to say. And he says, Dr. Dixon, you've been talking now for 45 minutes about sales and sales effectiveness and sales people and sales process. And I'm sure our clients would find this very interesting, but maybe nobody told you, but we aren't salespeople. There's not a single salesperson in this entire audience. In fact, I would argue our firm doesn't actually sell anything. And what went through my mind, of course, was what time is my flight and can I possibly get an earlier flight home? But what I actually said in the moment was, shall we stipulate to the fact that there's a mysterious process by which the client's money ends up in your firm's bank account? Can we just call it sales? And fortunately, he laughed and so did everyone else. But I did file that away, Vishali, and thought, I am not going to go present to any more partner retreats because the research we've done, I think it was interesting at a high level, but it wasn't directly relevant to these people because again, partners in professional services firms, they are the product. They're not selling a product, they are the product, and they're selling advice. It's a different kind of sale. And not only that, but they've got to do their own lead gen and marketing. They've got to do their own sales. Then they've got to deliver the work. And then they're responsible for all the back-end client support and dealing with problems and then renewing the client relationship and hopefully getting the client to buy more. So they own the entire life cycle of the client relationship. So it wasn't until 2022 that we actually had the opportunity to go study professionals. We collected data on 3,000 professionals across law, consulting, accounting, executive search, investment banking, and public relations. And that's what formed the basis of the Activator Advantage. And again, we don't think that this has ever been done before, certainly not in an industry specific basis. And the feedback has been great. And I think a lot of it has been, thank goodness somebody finally studied this question. What do top rainmakers do differently, and use science and data and research to do it?
Yeah, and that's great. Again, you've sort of filled that gap and you saw it, like you said, it's a different type of selling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you mentioned, right, you conducted this research across three partners and all these service firms, law, accounting, consulting, investment banking, PR, executive search. What did you learn? What were some of the things?
So I think there's the big thing we learned at the highest level is that every partner falls into one of 5 statistically defined business development profiles or approaches. And so these are not profiles we made up. We use a statistical methodology to derive these from the data. But this is a fascinating thing in and of itself where, this question of what do top rainmakers do? Well, it turns out there are basically 5 different approaches that we see in the world. And every single partner, they may have elements of all 5 of these, but they all spike in one. They all have one primary posture. So I'll just very quickly give you the high level on each. So the first one is the expert partner. So the expert is an expert, as the name suggests. That means that they really focus on burnishing their credentials and broadcasting their credentials to the market. So they want to be known as one of the leading experts in a very specific space. That might be a type of law. It might be a type of tax advisory work. It might be a type of M&A or investment banking work, or a type of public relations. But they really want the market to know that if I am one of the leading practitioners in this very specific field. So if you as a client have a need that aligns with my expertise, you should find me and reach out to me. Now, the way that they make themselves known is they publish a lot of thought leadership. They are on LinkedIn, but when they're on LinkedIn, they're usually posting a point of view or a white paper and then waiting for people to come in and ask for a conversation. They tend to be kind of reluctant salespeople. They don't like bringing or asking for the business. They want to be asked for help, if that makes sense. One CEO of a large executive search firm said these partners like to aggressively wait for the phone to ring as their sales approach. So as you could tell, he's not a big fan of that approach from that description. And in practice, what it means is the expert is, again, quite reactive. And in today's market, by the time the client reaches out to the expert, usually they're talking to a few other experts from competitor firms. And now it can be a competition on who's going to do the work for the lowest fees possible. The second one is the confidant. The confidant's kind of like an old school trusted advisor. And of course, trusted advisor concept's been around in this industry for decades now. And I might argue that what they're doing is an extreme version of the trusted advisor approach. What the confidant does is they try to build a small portfolio of maybe 3 to 5 key client relationships. And they try to basically put a bear hug around these clients, not physically, but figuratively. And they do that by delivering great work. They deliver very responsive client service. So the client asks them to jump, they ask how high. They also try to build not just business relationships with their clients, but even personal relationships. So when we interview these folks, they'll speak wistfully about the fact that their family and the client's family go skiing together on the holidays, or maybe that this was somebody I knew from law school and now they are a general counsel and I am a partner in the law firm, and they were not just my friend and classmate, but they're now my client. And what the confidant is hoping is that by delivering great work and being very responsive and having a personal relationship, what they've basically done is built a wall or a moat around the client relationship that makes it impossible for somebody to steal that relationship, a competitor perhaps. In their mind, they believe that it would be unthinkable for the client to go to a competitor for the next piece of work. They should always come back to them because it would be like a violation of the kind of relationship we built. Now, the other thing about the confidant is because they don't have very many of these relationships, they tend to be very protective of them. So they have very sharp elbows inside of their own firms. They don't collaborate with their colleagues. They don't bring other partners into the relationship. And the reason is they live in fear of what might happen if one of their colleagues delivers bad work or does something that upsets the client, right? Because then they're set back to square one because they don't have very many of these deep relationships to rely on to drive their book of business. The third one is the debater. The debater is kind of a sharp-elbowed, opinionated know-it-all. So the way they sell to clients is by coming in and telling clients, you're doing it wrong. You're thinking about this opportunity the wrong way. They're trying to reframe the way the client thinks about an opportunity and upend their own entire understanding of that opportunity. Now, tipping my mid a little bit to the results, which we'll talk about in a moment, but these folks don't do very well in professional services. And that was actually surprising to me as a researcher because that book I mentioned before, The Challenger Sale, in the Challenger Sale, we actually found that these debaters, which we called challengers in that book, were the winning profile in business-to-business sales. But what that taught me was it's okay to be a challenger, to be a debater if you're selling a product. But if you are the product, it's a bit of a tough posture to adopt because ultimately in professional services, we're selling a relationship to our clients. Our clients have to want to spend time with us. And if every time we sit down with them, we're telling them they're doing it wrong, well, that can be quite exhausting to the client. The next one is the realist. The fourth one is the realist. The realist is I would call them the glass half empty professional. So they are very focused on leading with telling the client that things are going to take twice as long as they think. They're going to be twice as expensive as they budgeted, and the impact is going to be half as high or half as great as they think it is going to be. And that might strike you as an odd way to sell, but what these folks know is that every client out there, because professional services, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, it's a black box purchase, it's amorphous, right? And so it's a bit of a leap of faith for a client to hire a lawyer or an accountant or a consultant or an investment banker. They're going on brand and reputation and basically what the partner says they can do. But every client out there has been burned in the past by a consultant who's left them holding the bag or a lawyer who sent a surprise invoice after the matter was concluded. And realists know that clients have had these experiences. And so they try to do the exact opposite. By being completely above board, truthful, transparent, honest, they believe that will win preference with the client. As we saw in the results, these folks don't do particularly well either. And I think the reason is clients appreciate the transparency, but they also want the partners they hire to talk about what's possible. What could we accomplish together, not just what can't be done? And then the last one, of course, is the activator. And as the title of the book suggests, they're the winning profile when we look at business development performance. The activator is a super connector. So what they are trying to do is build, manage, and leverage their professional network as a source of leads for paid client work. So they see their professional network as their most important business asset, an asset that they harvest from and that they cultivate to drive paying client work. Now, that means they're very active on platforms like LinkedIn, of course, They are also very active in live settings. So when you talk about a firm event or an industry conference, these are the people who go in and kind of work the room, right? Where most partners like to, they tend to be kind of introverted. They stand in the corner and clump with their colleagues. Activators are out there, right? They're scheduling breakfasts and lunches and coffees and dinners with prospective clients. And what they're trying to do is not just collect a stack of business cards or a bunch of LinkedIn connections. And what they're trying to do is turn those connections into paying client relationships. So it's what they do next that's actually most interesting. And it's why we didn't call them connectors, because we think it kind of undersells what they're doing. They're activating those connections. And the way they do that is that they focus on proactively bringing new ideas to their clients before the client actually even realizes there is an opportunity or there is something, a risk or a threat out there in the marketplace. Activators are bringing those ideas to their clients. Now, what's so interesting about that is where most professionals bring ideas to their clients after their clients agree to pay them for help and sign them up for work, activators do it for free. So they're doing unpaid work. And as activators would tell you, it's their paid work that drives their bonus this year. It's all the unpaid work they're doing that drives their bonus next year and the year after. It's the groundwork they're laying. What they're trying to do with the client is, one, establish a posture of helpfulness and thoughtfulness. I'm the one who thought enough to alert you to this issue or opportunity. Everyone else is waiting to get paid and invoice you for the time. I'm doing it for free. The second thing is it gives you a chance, especially if you're a new prospect or client, gives you a chance to kick the tires on my skills. As we said, professional services is a black box purchase. So this gives you a little bit of a sense of who I am, how I advise people in my capabilities. And the last thing, and the most important reason they do it, is that even if the client decides this is an opportunity, Vishali, thank you for reaching out in alerting me to this, and I'm going to go talk to all the other firms out there and put together an RFP and make everyone compete for this business. At least I got in there first, so I took this as an opportunity to shape your understanding of the opportunity, ideally in a way that benefits me. So when you do force me to compete for the work, you're already preconditioned to think of me as the preferred provider. So those are the 5 profiles. And as I said, when we look at performance, actually 4 of the 5 are negatively correlated with revenue generation performance. So debaters, realists, confidants, and experts, where 80% of the partners we studied sit in one of those 4 profiles. Those profiles, the more you lean into them, the less business you're going to generate. And only activators as partners were statistically positively correlated with performance. And not to put too fine a point on it, but if you took a partner, an average partner, and they went from not very good to very good on activator behaviors and skills and time spent and techniques, they could lift their own revenue generation by up to 32%. So it's a huge number. And I think really represents a path forward for many of those partners out there who are struggling to build a successful book of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fascinating. So for someone who doesn't naturally identify as an activator, can they learn those skills?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that's really important, and the first question I almost always get when I present this work at partner retreats is this about one's personality? And I think it's important to point out that we didn't actually study personality traits. Obviously, personality is hard, if not impossible, to change. And for firms, that's kind of a hiring and firing decision, right? What we studied were behaviors, time spent, use of tools and technology, techniques and skills in the market, in live settings with clients, like pitching for work or negotiating fees, those kinds of settings. So we looked at not who they are, but more what they do day in, day out. Then the other 2 things I would say, Vishali, one, what we found now being out in the market and training thousands of associates and partners on these activator skills is that irrespective of a partner's personality and their natural proclivity and bent, every single partner can learn to do these things, right? So if I'm introverted and my nature is not to go and work the room or to be out there and work my network, I can still learn to do the things that activators do to bring that dimension to my business development approach. And then the other thing, I do get a lot of partners who ask me, I'm this kind of personality, can I learn to do it? And I think what we found in the research is activators do share a set of mindsets, but they're not really personality traits. And most activators, if you ask them, would say, one, I was not a born salesperson myself. I had to learn how to do this and get good at it. And it took a lot of trial and a lot of error and a lot of dusting myself up after being told no by a prospect or a client, picking myself up and trying again. But then over time, I learned how to do this and be more effective. And then it became kind of fun, right? It became something that wasn't unnatural to me, didn't feel like the kind of thing I want to avoid, but something I actually enjoy doing. And we had so many activators we interviewed tell us that they were actually deep introverts, which I found very interesting, in that they learn how to turn it on in certain settings, whether it's LinkedIn or it's an event or a conference, because they know those are target-rich environments to do business development, generate business, but it's personally very exhausting for them, but they know what's required in those moments.
Right. Yeah. And so you mentioned technology.
Yeah.
So how can leaders, or how should this this group of professionals be using technology? What role does it play in
Yeah.
making the Activator model work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that technology, especially sort of AI-powered technologies, have really changed the game for professionals. I'll give you maybe one use case or one example. So we found that activators are big users of platforms like LinkedIn, and other platforms like Exec Atlas from Equilar, where they can track movement in their professional network. So that used to be the kind of thing that was actually quite manual to do, right? And you had to be in the right place at the right time to see that LinkedIn alert, or to spot that a client had moved companies or moved industries or changed roles or got promoted. But now AI is alerting, the AI understands our network and our target client. They can alert us when those movements happen and even suggest to us possible ways to engage the client. Like here's a news event, or here's a regulatory change, or here's an announcement, something that's happened in their market or industry that you can use as a way to engage that client who might have just switched jobs or switched industries or switched roles. And so it really is a very powerful co-pilot or assistant to partners, and top partners, activators are probably across all the partners the heaviest users of technologies like that, whether it's CRM, whether it's a platform like LinkedIn. They are using it as I would say not a replacement for client engagement, but I'll nerd out here for a moment. But if anybody remembers the Iron Man movies, where you had Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, surrounded by this coat of armor powered by this supercomputer Jarvis. But I've had partners tell me, I see technology as my Jarvis, right? It's not doing the client engagement for me. It's not doing the work for me, but it makes my business development time so much more efficient, so much more effective, and so much more targeted and precise than it used to be.
So if you can help bring that to life and just give us some real world examples of how
Sure.
AI is being used by activators then.
Yeah, it's so I'd use I'll give you an example from one of our partners, a company called Intap. Intap is a technology company in the professional and financial services industries. And so work with a lot of law firms, a lot of consulting firms, accounting firms, with partners in those organizations. And as we know, partners are notoriously poor users of technologies like CRM. And so what Intap has found is that partners respond really well to kind of light consumer-like applications, like the kind of things we would use in our personal time. And that we can use AI to nudge partners to behave more like activators. So just an example, Vishali, I would give is, Vishali, you're a partner, you're an IP lawyer in the biotech industry, and I just want to alert you that this company that you've been following and that fits your target client profile just announced they have a new GC or a new head of R&D, right? And here's something based on the work you're doing with other firms like this firm that you might propose as an occasion to have a conversation, right? So I've pre-written the message for you, jump in there, make it your own, of course, before you send it. But think about all that work and all that time that basically just happened in the background, right? So these kinds of things make being an activator a lot easier for a partner. It doesn't require huge amounts of time. And to be honest, in a world where partners are not just, selling the work, they've got to deliver it. And especially in places like law where, partners may have 2,000-hour per year requirements to bill time to clients. They just don't have a lot of time to do business development. They're part-time salespeople at best. And so that's where technology is so powerful, is it helps them make optimal use of the limited time they have to actually be good at sales.
Yeah. So how then do activators collaborate differently than their peers when it comes to things like business development?
Yeah, so I think at the highest level, what you find is, and then I'll bring it down to a more tactical level. At the highest level, I think what gets in the way of collaboration, many partners and firm leaders assume that the reason their partners don't collaborate, which of course is what clients want, right? Clients want the partners they do business with, that they hire, to bring the breadth of their firm's capabilities to bear, right? They don't want to, clients are very clear about this. They don't want to be forced to walk the halls of a professional services firm and cobble together their own bespoke solution. If I hire you as a partner, no matter what practice group you're in, I expect you to be aware of all of your firm's capabilities and to leverage those capabilities and connect a team together to solve the most complex, most challenging issues that I have as a client. Don't make me do that on my own. But despite that, in firms, we all know this. We all know that's what clients want. And Professor Heidi Gardner's research is very clear on this, that that is good for partners, that is good for clients, and it is good for firm growth. But still, a lot of firms struggle to drive collaboration. And I think a lot of firms and firm leaders and even partners assume that the reason that collaboration is not happening in their firms is because they're not being paid to collaborate. And so often the conversation turns to compensation, right? We are not paid to share credit and to collaborate. We are paid to eat what you kill. It's a dog eat dog kind of world in most firms. And while I wouldn't say that that compensation is unimportant, I think it needs to be aligned with collaboration. So if you're telling your partners to collaborate, you need to have a compensation system that reflects that. And where firm leaders get into trouble is when they tell their partners to do one thing, but then they pay their partners to do something else. So at the very least, make sure there's connection between the pay and reward system and what you're telling your partners to do. However, I don't think that's the thing that actually gets in the way. And I've seen many firms go out there and change their compensation program and still not see collaboration happening. And I think what it comes down to, actually, for most partners, is a lack of trust in their colleagues, and actually even a lack of confidence to talk to their clients about issues and topics and opportunities and challenges that might fall outside of their personal area of expertise. So if you think about professionals or partners in most firms, think about lawyers. They spend 10 years of their career after law school becoming, as they go through the associate ranks and senior associate ranks before they make partner, becoming deep experts in a very narrow area of the law. Then when they make partner, we want them to sit in front of these top tier clients from big firms and then have conversations about topics that they don't know anything about. So if I'm an IP litigator, you want me to talk about employment law and you want me to talk about international issues and things that I'm not comfortable with. And what partners become very self-conscious about, maybe asking questions or saying things around those other topics that might out them as not being an expert. And what they really do pride themselves on, and they believe that their worth in the face of the eyes of the client, is that they are deep experts and they actually know more than the client about what they've been hired to help the client with. In the moment that they start veering outside of their area of expertise, suddenly the game is up, right? They've shown themselves to not be as deep of a subject matter expert to the client. So I think it's actually a confidence issue in most cases, and it runs counter to what most professionals learn as they're coming up the ranks, which is focus on your area and become an expert. That is your currency in this market. But activators are actually quite open, having conversations with clients that extend beyond the boundaries of what the client originally hired them for. So they don't profess to be experts in areas that they are not. And in fact, are quite forthcoming about that, saying, Vishali, I'm not an expert in employment law, but what I do know is that our firm has some of the world's leading experts in this area. But again, with the caveat that I'm not an expert, would you mind if I just ask you a few questions about how that issue is manifesting for you, your firm, for your team? Tell me a little bit more I'll take some notes, and then I'd like to go back and find the right person and then make an introduction for you. Now, activators don't mind kind of going out on that edge, and they don't mind. And in fact, most of them would say, it actually builds a lot of credibility with the client when you say, I am not the expert here. I don't have the answers, but I will find the person who does. And what they love is that moment where they say, good news, Vishali, Susan is the leading employment lawyer in our firm. She's one of the leading lights in this field. She's very busy, but I found some time in her calendar. If you would be open, I can set up a conversation, no charge. And I just sit back and reap the rewards of having made that introduction, because I know you're going to come out of that conversation thrilled with what Susan told you and the perspective she offered, and you're going to be thanking me for it, even though I didn't do anything other than make an introduction. So the collaboration is something that activators do proactively. So they are super connectors. They're bringing ideas proactively, and then unlike confidants who try to keep their colleagues out, activators are trying to bring colleagues in. And the reason they're doing it is that they know clients are less loyal today. It's a more competitive market than it used to be. And they believe very deeply it's fine. It's all well and good if my client values me, if they see value in the work I do. But what's more important is that they see value in the work that we do as a firm. So what I'm trying to do is shift the client from me to we. And how do I do that? Well, I do that by bringing my colleagues from other parts of my firm, other practice groups, other markets, other offices, into my client, because I know they're going to knock the socks off of my client. They know they're going to wow them. And what happens then is I establish more points of connection into the client organization. And that is a relationship that's stickier, right? Because if their client's just buying from me, that's easy come, easy go. They can go with somebody else tomorrow. But if we're supporting them across many priorities and initiatives and opportunities, that's the kind of relationship the client thinks twice before they cut the cord and go with somebody else.
That's right. So then what can firm leaders do to foster more activator behaviors, promote those skills across their teams?
Yeah, I think the main thing, obviously, the messaging is important. The alignment of compensation is also important. And in fact, in the book, we profile two firms. One is an executive search firm, Russell Reynolds Associates, and the other is a large management consulting firm called Guidehouse, in some of the changes they've made to their compensation model in their firm to align collaboration guidance with collaboration-based compensation. So that is important, and firm leaders need to do that. But I think actually more important than that, they need to invest in developing the skills with their partners so that their partners are comfortable and confident enough to have conversations about topics that fall outside of their area of expertise. That is the most important thing, I think. And as well, for these partners to understand, doing that is actually tremendously valuable to the client, right? Because the client is looking for that. And what was a surefire way to get you fired and get your competitor hired is by not bringing the breadth of your firm's capabilities to bear and instead only selling your individual expertise. And how frustrating it can be for partners to find out, wow, my client hired our competitor to do this work, but our firm does that work. Why didn't they come to us, right? That, of course, requires that those partners are comfortable talking about those capabilities. It actually, even more basically, it requires that the partners know that the firm has those capabilities and they know which colleagues within their firm are the right people to put in front of the client. So knowledge management and really helping partners understand everything the firm does. And no firm that I know is standing still. They're always adding new capabilities. They're acquiring smaller firms. They're either merging with other firms. They're hiring partners in from competitors. They're lateraling them into their firm. They're developing new capabilities all the time. And so that is an always on thing. We've always got to make sure our partners understand what we can do as a firm, who to put in front of your clients, and then how to have those conversations, and then make sure you're rewarding them for doing that.
Yeah. And you mentioned just the market in general. So
Sure.
if we can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What shifts are you seeing? What are some of the changes that you've seen in professional services over, just the recent years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would actually argue, I think this, as I said before, there's not been a lot of quantitative research of rainmakers or top partners in professional services firms. But I think why Activator has really caught fire in the professional services market, and it's a big topic of conversation, it's not really because of the research or the uniqueness of that study, which is part of it. But I actually think the bigger part is that the client buying environment today is dramatically different from how it was even 5 years ago. So we ran a study over the past few years with C-level clients, a few hundred of them, and we asked them a set of questions about what it's like to buy from professional services firms and to hire partners to do service for you. One of the things we asked in that survey was for C-level executives to respond to the following statement. Provided the partner or firm you hired for your last piece of work, whether it's a legal matter, it's an executive placement, it's an M&A transaction, it's a consulting engagement, provided they did good work and delivered value, and provided you have a good relationship with them, would you hire them again for the next piece of work? So 5 years ago, more than 75% of clients would say, yeah, I would just go back to the same firm. It's a lot of work to switch firms. If you got somebody you like and you trust and they know you and you know them and they deliver value, why wouldn't you go back to them? Today, that number is only 53%. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get the work, but what it does mean is that clients will invite you to compete for the next piece of work, but you're not going to automatically get it no matter how much value you've delivered and no matter how much they like you and how deep your relationship is. 5 years from now, we ask clients how that will change, and only 37% of clients were willing to say, I would go with the same incumbent firm we've used in the past. Now, why does that matter? Because the entire professional services industry has for a very, very long time revolved around this belief of if you do good work, if you've got a good relationship with your client, if you're above board, truthful, transparent, honest, they will keep coming back to you. And that is the surest way. There's been a tremendous incumbency advantage in this industry for a very, very long time. And that's a great way to build a book of business and to drive firm growth. But what happens when that's no longer true? When your client, your longtime client, forces you to compete for the work and maybe goes with your competitor, no matter how much value you've delivered and no matter how great your relationship is with them. So it really, we have seen a complete upending of the way that clients buy in this industry. Now, what's driving that? Well, part of what's driving it is that procurement is much more involved in professional services purchasing than ever before. It used to be that procurement was really involved in, squeezing, suppliers for the price of a widget, right? And technology contracts and things like that. Now they're getting into evaluating contracts with outside counsel, law firms, and consulting engagements, and search professionals, and M&A and transactional work, PR work, et cetera. This used to be soft spend purchasing that really was outside of procurement's kind of scope, but that's no longer the case. We're also seeing clients are today much more comfortable with not buying only from one-stop shops like Big Four consultancies or top law firms, but instead knitting together capabilities and going to boutique niche providers and increasingly alternative service providers to create their own integrated solutions and knit together best of breed solutions from across different firms. We've seen the rise of AI, of course, and tech-enabled service providers that are not just siphoning off low-value work, but increasingly starting to get into the high-value work that used to be just the exclusive domain of the white shoe firms and the big firms out there in the market. So again, I think we've seen bigger changes or more change in the way that clients buy professional services in the last 5 years than we've seen in the previous 100 years combined. And I think it's this change that is causing firms and partners to look for a new answer, right? It's always been the trusted advisor model, but that model seems to be breaking down for practitioners, for professionals in the market, and they're now looking for something else. And that's why Activator comes, I think, at the right time.
Yeah, for sure. So then what would you recommend are some small daily shifts a professional could do to start showing up more like an activator?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the highest level, the book goes into, of course, a lot more detail, but the highest level activators do 3 things that make them unique. The first thing is that they commit to business development. The second thing is that they connect broadly and deeply. And the third thing is that they create value proactively and personally for their clients. So just say something about each and then maybe give a quick just do it for folks. So committing to business development. Now, I often am told that's kind of circular reasoning or circular logic, because what we found is that the people who are most successful at business development do the most business development. So it is true, but think about this for a moment. Professional services is not like sales. It's not a full-time, sales is a part-time job for a partner in a law firm or a consulting firm. It's not a full-time job. And for many of these partners, they don't like selling. They don't feel like they should have to sell. They feel like their expertise should sell itself. They don't like talking to clients about things that clients haven't proactively reached out to them for help with. And so they end up sitting back and waiting aggressively for the phone to ring. And so they will find, most partners will find almost any excuse in the book not to do the thing they don't want to do, which is sales. The only time they will sell is if they lose a big client, maybe they lose a big pitch they were expecting to win, or maybe if it's during a kind of a cyclical downturn in the market and they need to get out there and hustle for more work. But they do it episodically. Activators are very different. They have a commitment to business development. That means that they have a daily commitment, a daily routine around business development, not huge amounts of time because they're still delivering just as much client work as anybody else. They're still supporting firm-wide priorities and initiatives, but they carve out and protect time every day to do a little bit of business development, just like going to the gym every day, right? They stick to their routine. They put that time on their calendar. They protect it and they preserve it, and it doesn't get scheduled over, right? Now, the reason they do that is that they believe that, look, clients are less loyal than they used to be. That longtime client's been working with you for 10 years, might be somebody else's client tomorrow. So you better have a plan B, you better have a backup plan. And so that's why they're always trying to build their pipeline of opportunity in advance of that happening and not get caught flat-footed. Now, a practical tip I would give everyone is don't just put that time block on your calendar. First thing I would say is start small, be very actionable, and be very precise. So don't put a time block on your calendar for Wednesday for 2 hours to do business development. Because when that calendar invite pops up on your Outlook and you don't have a game plan for what you're going to do with that time, you haven't thought through it, you're going to go right back to the other thing you were working on, client work or firm initiatives or what have you. So instead, start small. Start with 15 minutes. And then here's another tip. On Sunday night or Monday morning, create a little list and say, what am I going to do on Wednesday when that 15-minute reminder pops up on my calendar to do business development? What am I going to do to make the most use of that 15 minutes so I'm not staring at it with like a deer in the headlights with no game plan? So start small and build from there. The second thing activators do is they connect broadly and deeply, right? They use their networks. They're using internal networks, bringing their colleagues to their client. They're also building and managing their professional networks externally because, again, their network is their stocked fishing pond of opportunity, and they harvest opportunity from that fishing pond. So what I would recommend to partners that they do is that they, go back to your calendar and look at every client meeting you've had over the past 6 months, then look at all the client meetings you have for the next 6 months. And what I'd recommend you do is send a personal LinkedIn invitation to every senior executive and every senior executive's team member you've met with over the past 6 months and in the next 6 months, and reach out to them and send them a personal note. It was great meeting with you back in March. I want to check in, make sure things are going, whatever it is, or I'm looking forward to meeting with you in July. And I would like to send this invitation to you. Now, the first thing I find is that partners get a little bit squeamish about that. They say, well, I don't know if my client wants that kind of relationship with me. But I can assure you, having done a lot of client research, they do. It's not just that they want it and they're open to it, they expect it. And the real reason to do it is that the way the platform works, of course, is that once you're connected with that executive, and once you follow their company and maybe follow the company's CEO and other key leadership team members, you are now training the algorithm to start putting in your feed all the things that those people comment on, the things they like, the things they post, the things they say. And it's almost like being a fly on the walls of their company. You're suddenly exposed to all the things they care about. And from that flow of information, you will surface opportunities for you to jump in and offer value and offer insight. Now, the real reason to do it is if you don't do it and your competitor does do it, well, don't be surprised that they spot an opportunity to work with your client and then your client ends up hiring them. And then you're pulling your hair out wondering, why didn't my client come to me? Well, it's because your competitor spotted an opportunity and they were proactive about it, right? And they brought that idea to the client and the client never even knew you did that kind of work, right? The last thing is this commitment to value, delivering value proactively and personally. So what we're talking about here is bringing ideas to clients before clients ask for help, right? I saw a risk or an opportunity in the marketplace and I'm bringing it to you before you've reached out to me and asked for my view. Now, clients love this. And this really surprises partners because partners often fall into this mindset of, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to, reach out to my client. If they know how to get a hold of me, they have my email, they have my phone number. If they need help, they'll find me, right? They know what I can do. But what the very best partners know is that the client is so heads down on their own work, on their own priorities, their own strategies, their own initiatives, that you as a partner are going to talk to more people like them in a week than they're going to talk to all year. You have a much broader perspective on the marketplace than they do. And clients are not just open to you bring that perspective, they expect you to do it. And again, if you don't do it and your competitor does, don't act surprised if they go with them instead of you. So proactively bring those new ideas. And so the tip I'd give everyone is think about, what is the thing that you, as a professional, as a partner in your firm, what is the thing you know about whatever big issue or challenge, the thing you help companies with, the thing you help leaders with? What's the thing you know that you wish everybody knew? The thing maybe they take for granted, the risk they're not thinking about, the opportunity they could be getting after. Package that up in an email and reach out to people with it. And you'll be surprised how many folks are open to that idea, right? Open to having that conversation. Now, activators also create value, as I said, personally. Now, what do I mean by that? Activators are really trying to bring another dimension to value. If I took a step back for a moment, I would say that most partners in professional services firms are focused on delivering value, two types of value to their clients. The first one is business value. I help my client make money, save money, avoid risk, etc. The second source of value is trust value. I do my work in a truthful and transparent and trustworthy way. I do it in an ethical and transparent and above board way. Those two things together are the essence of what it means to be a trusted advisor. You deliver good work and you do it in a trustworthy way, in a credible way. Now, what activators will tell you is that that is absolutely necessary, but is no longer sufficient in this market, this competitive market, because let's face it, there are trusted advisors all over the place. Many of them work at your competitors' firms. It's not only you in your market. Nobody has an exclusive license to be a trusted advisor in their domain area. And so it's kind of table stakes. You've got to be a trusted advisor, but it's not enough. So activators actually look to layer on a third source of value, which I would call personal value. Now, what is personal value? It's not knowing your clients' kids' names. It's not remembering their birthday or their wedding anniversary. Those things are nice to do, and you should keep doing them, but it's not personal value. Personal value is approaching your client and thinking about your client as a person who has career aspirations of their own, who has challenges at work, maybe a new boss, new ownership structure, an initiative that went sideways, an underperforming team or team member, causes that they're passionate about outside of work, nonprofits, foundations, etc. Challenges they might be dealing with, personal struggles, health challenges that they or their family might be grappling with. And an activator is always asking the question, outside of the paid work that the client is paying me for right now, what else is important to them? And how can I be supportive on those things? Is there something I can do? Something that a colleague in my firm can do? Or maybe I can just make an introduction to somebody in my network to help actually move the needle on that stuff that's important to them personally. Again, not covered by the statement of work, not inside the scope of our paid engagement. It's outside of that. But what activators will tell you is, in a world where clients are less loyal than they once were, the key to creating a sticky relationship is, one, bring in your colleagues and establish more points of connection in the client organization. And two, make sure you are thinking of your client as a person. Deliver business value and trust value. Be a trusted advisor, but create that stickiness, that personal value, because that creates lasting relationships in a very, very competitive marketplace where there are lots of trusted advisors out there.
Yeah. So do you think that this is really the key to building that loyalty and ensuring sort of this historic relationship, right, amongst?
Yeah. I think if I'd say two things. One is that, so statistically, the most important variable actually in the entire study, the thing most highly correlated with business development effectiveness was how partners responded to the following statement. My clients think of me even when we're not engaged in paid work. So think about that for a moment. That's the kind of client relationship where your client is texting you on a weekend or in the evening just because they want to pick your brain about something, because they value your perspective and advice, and they're not worried about getting a bill for it, but you are kind of in the inner circle, right? You're a sounding board, you've got their ear, etc. and they would reciprocate. If you reached out and asked for something, they would respond right away, right, with an offer of help. Now, I think that one of the things that most partners get wrong is that they think that they will build a deep relationship, and deliver value to clients after the client signs the agreement. Once you agree to hire me, I'll deliver tons of value and we'll build a great relationship. For activators, it's kind of the other way around. What they're trying to do is deliver value and build a deep relationship before they engage in paid work with their client. And that's why it doesn't feel like selling to them, because paid work is simply the natural evolution of an already deep relationship, right? It's not an untoward thing. It's not the kind of thing that is seen as unseemly to the client. It's a little bit like I was talking to one of my older kids the other day. It's like, getting married is just kind of the natural extension of a great relationship, and maybe you live together and maybe you cohabitate and then maybe you get married and then maybe you have kids. And it would be surprising to just run into some stranger on the street and ask them to marry you. But that's actually what most partners do. We'll develop that depth of relationship and I'll be valuable, but only after you sign this agreement. They're only interested in delivering value once they're paid to do so. And activators really just aren't wired that way. And again, that's why it doesn't feel like sales to them.
Yeah. So what do you hope readers then, Matt, will feel or do differently after reading The Activator Advantage?
Yeah, I think, one of the really important things for professionals out there is, I think they come at this research from a variety of different places. So you've got new professionals, newly minted partners, maybe people who are associates and are trying to work their way up the ranks to make partner. You've got people who were lateral hires, maybe from government or industry, and now are partners in a firm. And they're experts, they have great reputations and brands, but they've never built a book of business before. So these are people who are just kind of starting out in their business development careers. And for those people, they're quite open to tell me what I should go do. And I would also say that many of those folks, those younger partners in particular, they look around their firms and they see a lot of gray hair and a lot of people who have been very successful, but they also know that what worked for them to become top rainmakers probably isn't going to work for them now, right? It's not the same playbook because the clients are buying very differently. We've also got a lot of partners out there who are maybe mid-career professionals. They've been partners for a while, but they're seeing the effectiveness of their old approaches kind of start to wane a little bit. And they're looking for a new way to breathe new life into their business development approach. And then we've got, top people who are experienced, top rainmakers, top performers in their firms. And you might say, well, what would they get out of something like this? Well, I find that many of those folks like staying on top, and they like being top of the list in terms of bookings and being pulled up in the partner retreat and winning awards and accolades from firm leaders. And so many of those folks are looking for a way to future-proof their success because they also know the clients are buying very differently today. So they're looking for that new angle on what they've done. But I think the most important point here is, for many professionals, you've been successful in your client development approach so far. Maybe it's not as much success as you would like, but what I want you to take away from the book is not that you should overwrite everything about your current approach, but rather what can you take from the activator model and then incorporate into what you already do really well, right? So let's think about tailoring this to our current approach, not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if that makes sense. But so in other words, it's not a one size fits all. It's quite a flexible approach or a recommendation to go and tailor it to your own client engagement approach. Take what's worked, jettison those things that are not working, and bring in some more activator, and you'll see positive results as an outcome of that.
Yeah, well, that's great advice, Matt. And it's a great read, The Activator Advantage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Vishal. I really appreciate the invite.
Thank you. And thanks for watching Sarder TV.